want to thank Stacy and her team at the Chamber, number one, first and foremost, for the glamour shot that you put on the front of the, I don't know if that was my high school yearbook picture, maybe. But as you can see, it's a far cry different than the man before you today. Let's get a few things out of the way first and foremost. Number one, thank you for allowing me to serve you in House District 67. I sincerely consider it a great honor. I appreciate the ability to serve my community, my family. Many of you out there, I'm looking into the eyes of friends, supporters, those who I have cried with, prayed with, and campaigned with, worked with, and I greatly appreciate your support. To my colleagues, Ed Setzler, where are you, sir? Is there somewhere? He didn't leave already. Thank you. Ed is a mentor of mine. I've known Ed for many years, and I will get to that as we go through this of how friends can disagree. He is someone that I would go to bat with any day of the week. He is someone that I highly admire, and he is a great asset to the General Assembly, and I appreciate you, brother, very much. Please. And to my colleagues, Martin and Joseph, thank you for keeping me young. It's an honor to serve with you guys. We've had a great first year, and I appreciate it. I thank God that you guys are down there, and thank you all. I'll echo the sentiments of Chairman Setzler. Thank you for sending these two gentlemen down there to advocate. I think we make a great team, and I appreciate you both. To start with, let's get it out of the way. I've heard all the jokes. I have received all the little fun gag gifts on the bill that I'm working on. So I wanted to start off with a slide to tell you what I'm not in favor of and what the bills that I have worked on is not. As you can see, Jeff Spicoli is here. Some of you may know who Jeff Spicoli is. Jeff Spicoli would not like our bill if you could scoot it over. I don't think it will scoot over a little bit. But what it says is that House Bill 324 is not the smoking use, either medically or recreationally, the smoking use of marijuana. That is something that, and rightly so, something that we've had to address for the last 5 years. It's something that when we started down this road, we needed to address. We also had a lot of explaining, I guess you could say, to do, but a clear delineation, a bright line between what we were endeavoring to do for the citizens in our state and what we are not going, the road we are not going down. As we go forward, a lot of people said, well, why you? And I can assure you, in my senior year in Romans and Galatians and taking Old Testament and New Testament, working at a local church, that I never in my wildest dreams, while I was sitting in senior level classes at Emmanuel College, about to go onto the mission field after graduation, that I thought I would ever be standing before any community talking about how wonderful marijuana was. The youth group that I pastored at that time, I'm sure their parents would have not seen that either. My mom and dad would have never seen that. But to tell you the story, and I want to set the stage because a lot of you in here maybe know this story. Some of you may be hearing it for the first time. Some of you even asked, Michael, why did you get involved in this? And this is why, right here. A little boy by the name of Caden Clark, number 19. He's sitting right there in the middle. His mother, Jax, is his brother on the other side, and his mother is Kim Clark. I knew her as Kim Shaw because I went to elementary and middle school with Kim Shaw. We were in 6th and 7th grade and 8th grade together at Nash Middle School in Smyrna, Georgia. I had not seen her since high school. And in December of 2013, I was walking in the Dallas Christmas Parade, and like we always do, we very much enjoy it. And to me, that's the Dallas Christmas Parade is kind of the beginning of Christmas. That's kind of the way I see it. That's how our family that's the kickoff of the Christmas season. And I got home and was just going through some emails and was about to get ready for a Christmas party for our family. And an email from Kim Shaw Clark popped up. Actually, it was a Facebook Messenger. And she said, I didn't even know you were an elected official. I live in Dallas, Georgia, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are on medical marijuana. And needless to say, I was trying to find the delete button and wondering, did she see if I've opened this yet? And literally kind of pushed away from the desk, and these were my words. Oh, Lord, not this. I don't want to be this guy that, medical marijuana. This is a ruse, I just got elected. I don't want to deal with this. And something very, very interesting and something that changed my life at that moment happened. I heard my kids upstairs running and playing, 3 little girls. And I said, well, I'm going to read this and just kind of see what she's talking about. And she said, my son, Caden, has epilepsy. Matter of fact, intractable epilepsy. And he has multiple seizures daily. And Micah, we've tried everything under the sun. Matter of fact, we've had a portion of my son's brain removed surgically to try and help stop the amount of seizures that he goes through on a daily basis. And I've included a short video, and I'd like for you to watch it and get back with me. I don't know if you will, but I hope that you will, because tomorrow we're moving to Colorado. And so I thought, wow, okay, I'm going to watch the video. And the video was a video of one of the Stanley brothers. It was a TED Talk series in Colorado about a little girl by the name of Charlotte Figge and an oil that they had produced called Charlotte's Web. And I was amazed by it. I sat and watched this video over and over again. And then I recognized I keep hearing my little girls running upstairs and playing. And at that moment, the way I believe, I felt like the Lord said, so what would you do? And I had to kind of stop. I said, if this was one of your little girls running upstairs, what would you do? So I emailed about 15 legislators. I said, well, what are y'all's thoughts on this? And, just want to get your feedback. And they started sending feedback in. And I was really convicted at that moment. I want to know more about this. So I talked to my pastor, I talked to my family, all during the Christmas break. And I was really torn on this issue. And then I met this guy, J-Bo Wages. Some of you know J-Bo, and if you know J-Bo, he's not a quiet man. He's a very, very vocal individual. And I had never met him before. And he wanted to introduce me to his daughter. Is that it, J-Bo? Well, thank y'all so much. That was quite easy, I think. Appreciate y'all being here. He wanted me to meet his daughter, and Charlie Watts had set that up, so I'm indebted to Charlie Watts. And I spent 4 hours on the phone with J-Bo Wages. And I'm going to tell you when I spent that 4 hours. Because the year this was happening, y'all remember the snowstorm that hit Atlanta? That was the night I spent 4 hours on the phone with J-Bo. Because I knew, we'd gotten to the legislature. Alan Peake had approached me and he had said, hey, I've got this bill. Are you going to sign it? And I was like, you're not supposed to know that I'm interested in this. He said, well, you're the only one that, anybody has said would sign this bill. I need to drop it and we at least need another signature. So I signed the bill. And from that point on, I was in deep. And I needed to know as much as I could about this bill. And then the snowstorm hit. And I knew that the Douglas County Sentinel had posted a front page article, Gravley signs medical marijuana bill. And I was like, I hadn't even had time to explain this to anybody. Hadn't had time to talk about this to anybody. My dad's calling me, Sheriff Miller is calling me, Sheriff Gullidge is calling me. And I thought, I didn't get out in time to make it back home, darn it, before the snowstorm. Thank you, Lord, because I didn't want to come back home. I didn't know what to say to people, to be quite honest with you. And I sat in my Capitol office that night and watched Netflix and read as much as I could. And then I got a phone call from J-Bo, and we talked for 4 hours. And he told me about his daughter. And it was at that point where I said, Lord, we are elected to do things for people. We're elected to serve people in an honest manner. And sometimes that's going to be tough. But a lot of times, I always said to myself, I never want to be that person that sits on the sidelines when there's an issue at hand. I want to dig in. I want to dive in. But I didn't necessarily want to dive into this. I thought it might be tax policy or gun policy or education or whatever. And the Lord said, well, that's not of your choosing. Here's an opportunity for you to help people. And that's what you've said you wanted to do. Do you want to truly help people? And it may be a little rough and bumpy, but here's an opportunity. It's up to you. And at that time, I knew this is something that was going to become a passion of mine. And I had a conversation. I called my dad back, and I said, I've been trying to get in touch with you. I know you have. And he said, I just want to ask you one question. Did you pray about this? You know, you really, son, this is on the front page of the newspaper. Your mom and I don't know what to say to people when they're calling. And I said, you know, Dad, I have thought about it. I have prayed about it. And I'm going to ask you the same question I felt like I was asked. If this was Hope, Bella, or Abby, what would you do? What would you, where would we go? What extent would we do for them? And it's not as easy as saying that, but when you think about it and you drill down, what are you willing to do for your child or a loved one in this type of situation? So these are the faces of House Bill 324. This is why we started all of this. This is why we went to bat at the Capitol. Were kids across the state who had epilepsy, cancer, Dravet syndrome, Lennox-Gastaut, mitochondrial disease, Tourette syndrome, autism. Those are the kids. We got to know who these families were. We got to find out who they were. Now, I don't want to sit and just tell you an emotional story. Ladies and gentlemen, we were dealing with a federally illegal drug. This is a Schedule I narcotic. By definition, a Schedule I narcotic is no medical value, highly addictive. And here we have these families, these children, and their parents who either were treating at CHOA, they were at Augusta, and they've tried everything. The seizures aren't stopping. Their neurologists, their pediatricians are talking with them. Now all of a sudden this talk about an oil comes up, and this video is being referenced in Colorado. What are you going to do? Well, these parents were grasping for straws. They didn't know what to do, so they were all going to try it. And lo and behold, it was working for some of them. Matter of fact, these kids, 3 of them in that photo were on adult dose levels of opioids. They were comatose, levels that would only be prescribed for adults. And that's what the doctor who prescribed them said during testimony. And they were coming off of these and they were experimenting with this oil. And the seizures were dropping. So I stayed in touch with J-Bo, and we worked through this. And the first bill in 2013, House Bill 885, it was 2014, we got it through the House. And what that did was that simply allowed these families to possess 20 ounces or less of low THC medical cannabis oil. It did not pass the Senate that year. So we had a study committee that we went statewide on. And we traveled the state talking. We went from Augusta Medical to Mercer University and their medical school. We were here in Atlanta. We were in West Georgia. And we were hearing from doctors and law enforcement and parents, and the rooms were packed. Something was happening. And we were able to come back with House Bill 1, and we were able to pass that bill. Now, can you tell me, just raise your hand if you know, I told you the year just a minute ago. What year did we first pass the first medical marijuana bill in the state of Georgia? 2014. Let's try 1979. George Busby was in the governor's office. Lieutenant Governor Zell Miller was in the lieutenant governor's office. That was where he was. And Tom Murphy was in the speaker's office. And a man by the name of Verrill Smith, who represented Palmetto, Georgia, was advocating for a woman by the name of Mona Taff. And Mona Taff was a young, beautiful lady who was married to a man by the name of Harris Taff. And Harris Taff had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And she came down to the legislature and she advocated on behalf of her husband. Why? Because during his chemo and radiation therapy, a nurse pulled her aside and said, this is killing him. Matter of fact, he's not eating. He's lost a tremendous amount of weight. He's one of those that just doesn't respond to this type of therapy. And she says, I don't know what to do. He's not sleeping. He's withering and he's going fast. And she said, this was her testimony, if you give him some marijuana, it'll help him. And if you tell anybody I said that, I'll lose my job. So Mona Taft embarked on getting Harris some marijuana. Now, at that time, it was the smoking kind. But she did, and she chronicled Harris's response. His nausea went away. His appetite came back. And the doctors even commented on the fact that his immune system was actually starting to fight the cancer. Now, Harris didn't live long after that. He lived for about 6 months to a year. But she came and advocated because she saw a difference in Harris's life. So the first bill that passed in the state of Georgia for medical marijuana was a smoking use of the plant, and it was for stage 4 cancer and glaucoma. And the medicine was supposed to be received out of the University of Mississippi, which had a NIDA designation, which means National Institute of Drug Abuse. And they were going to get that. Georgia was going to just get that shipment from there, and we were going to allow our patients with those diagnoses to use. Problem was, NIDA designation doesn't allow for production and distribution. It's simply a federal government designation that allows you to study and grow it. That's it. So no one in Georgia ever received any of the Mississippi University marijuana. So we had to do something. So we came in, we struck in House Bill 1, we struck smoking, we put in oil use, and we had about 8 diagnoses. And we were able to pass that bill. And it was a great day for Georgians. A lot of these families that were moving to Colorado were going to plan on coming home. Caden Clark's dad never got to go with him. And this was the most interesting part about Caden Clark's dad. Caden Clark's dad is a 25-year veteran over narcotics with the Atlanta Police Department. And I always found that very, very interesting. And he was who I would work with and get details on him and Kim and how Caden was doing. Well, we soon found out that that bill had one problem. You can possess it in the state of Georgia, and you can treat with it, and these diagnoses and these kids are going to be able to treat with their doctors, and you sign up on a registry card, and you're legally allowed to possess it if you present the card, but there's nowhere to get it. You can't grow it. You can't sell it. You can't purchase it. The only way they were getting it was you had to smuggle it in. So these parents quickly found out, this is great, Micah. You and Alan have, done a great job, but we have no ability to do this. And the medical costs alone are draining us. We've now then to incur travel costs, lodging. And when you get to these other states that were passing bills like this, those states' laws said non-residents are not allowed to get their oil. So here we were in a catch-22. So these parents started forming groups, and they started traveling across state lines to different states that were growing it. They were having to buy flower marijuana, weed. I guess I don't know what other thing to call it. And they were bringing bags of marijuana back to Georgia. Now, how many federal laws do you think they're breaking? They're now drug trafficking. Not only could you be stopped in Kansas or Oklahoma or Alabama, Tennessee, and you're a carrier of marijuana. And they weren't just getting a little bit, because who would spend $1,000 or so have to purchase large amounts because you didn't want to have to go every month? They were bringing large amounts back in their kitchen, pulling up YouTube videos on how to extract the oil out of it so that they could give it to their child. And that's by testimony in the Georgia House of Representatives. So we had a problem. We needed cultivation. But while all of that was going on, not only were these the faces of cannabis, so were these individuals. We were finding out that it was helping with adults who were illegally getting it, whether it be Dallas Manning with adult autism, pretty far on the spectrum, Melissa Davenport or Dave Cook with ALS. These individuals were starting to say, it's helping me, or my doctor has asked me, he thinks that this may help me, or she thinks that I should apply for a license. And then it became the fastest growing population that we have, with Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's. Even today, this is our fastest growing demographic. Now see, I've been helping all these kids, I've been working with J-Bo. He was telling me that Sydney's seizures are reducing. Matter of fact, we just pulled her off of all opioids. And our neurologist is a little cautious about it, but he even said, Micah, that she's doing better than I've ever seen her before. The school system has said Sydney's responding. Her motor skills, her eyes, she's trying to communicate. We were getting those reports from across the state with different kids, different parents. And all this while I was working on behalf of these kids, and I loved it. And I had to address my own family. You see, that's Heather's grandmother. That's Jean Butler. And if you see that beautiful face, go back here, if it'll change. I had to take a look at the bigger picture of this issue, because that's Miss Jean and Pawpaw Butler. They always put me in the back. I'm up there, the fat guy in the green sweater. I'm always in the back of the picture. But that's our family. And those are my daughters in front. And we would always have family get-togethers at Pawpaw Butler and Granny Jean's house. And that was in 2016 right there. Or 2015, I'm sorry. And she was vibrant. She was, that grandmother that always has something cooked when you get there. And if it's been eaten by one of the other family members, she is not, you don't have to ask her. She's just cooking and she's making something and it's ready for you. And it was just a wonderful time. We spent Christmases and Thanksgivings. We were very fortunate. We all live in the same community in South Paulding. So that was life for us. I was very blessed. And within a year, you couldn't recognize her because dementia, and some of you may have heard of sundowners. Sundowners, in the evening time comes and the hallucinations are just more than you can bear. And so I knew that this was an issue. I'd always thought about kids. I'd always been working with kids. And so I approached Pawpaw Butler and I said, Pawpaw, I think this could help. Do you want us to look into possibly getting Granny some oil? He said, no, I'm just not going to go down that path. I said, okay, listen, it's in your time frame. A year went by and it became increasingly hard for him. He's 75. They're pillars of their community, very active at New Georgia Baptist Church. And one night he called and he said, I think I'm ready to do something because Paulding County Sheriff's Office has just returned Granny back to the house at 10:30 in the evening. And she had been walking up and down Ridge Road in her nightgown. And he said, I got to do something. I got to do something. So we were able to get her the oil. And guys, I'm going to tell you, this is unbelievable stuff. She came off of 3 medications. The hallucinations stopped. And as a 75-year-old man trying to manage the love of his life, he said it's easier. She's not as anxious. We go to bed. I can sleep through the evening. She's not trying to get outside. And he said, Micah, I never thought I'd say this, but this is working for her. There's no side effects. Her doctor knew about it. And it was unbelievable. But yet again, now there's a waiting list because the oil that we were using to get to people that was being shipped in to those that couldn't get it became 4,500 on the waiting list. So it was 1, 2, 3, it ended up being 6 months before just a bottle of oil could get to somebody. So we had to do something. We had to say, okay, listen, we've got to do something. The federal government, we've done resolutions, we've stood in the well of the House and asked the federal government to act, reschedule this, even down to a Schedule 2. And a lot of the pushback kept coming was, well, Micah, there's no medical, the medical community is just not weighing in on this. As a matter of fact, the law enforcement community, overwhelmingly opposes it, but there was law enforcement officers that were coming forward and saying, listen, I support this. But still, you do not have the medical community. So we were able to kind of roll along, and that's Granny with my daughters, her great-grandchildren. Lo and behold, I found this. Federal government owns the patent on cannabinoids. Isn't that fantastic? Matter of fact, isn't that amazing? You can Google it on your phones right now. U.S. patent 6630507. Now I want to read something to you that says it on this, because this opinion was written by the NIH. Anybody know who the NIH is? National Institute of Health. And their scientists wrote this opinion. Because federal government, I started this process, or I became aware of this process in 2013. They applied for this patent in 1999. It was rejected, and then it was approved in 2003. That's 10 years before we even became aware of it. I want to read something to you. Cannabinoids have been found to have antioxidant properties. This newfound property makes cannabinoids useful in the treatment of oxidation-associated diseases, such as ischemic, age-related, inflammatory autoimmune diseases. The cannabinoids are found to have particular application as neuroprotectants. Wow. For example, in limiting neurological damage following ischemic insults, such as stroke and trauma, or in the treatment of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and HIV dementia. Non-psychoactive cannabinoids are particularly advantageous to use because they avoid toxicity. Federal government owns it. Now, the biggest push against us during this last 5 years, okay, good, we've got 4 o'clock, okay. The last 5 years has been the pharmaceutical industry. This is not going to work. This is not going to work. You can't do this. There's no double-blind placebo clinical trials. There has been no FDA testing. You cannot do this. One of the biggest ones actually came and identified themselves to the committee hearings. You just can't do this. This is not good. This is dangerous. Was GW Pharmaceuticals, a European-based pharmaceutical company. And they just pushed and pushed and pushed. And I thought, well, how? The evidence is here. The anecdotal evidence is here. Why aren't we able to move forward on this? I mean, committee after committee, study after study. What's the problem, guys? We can do this in a controlled environment. We have every known carcinogen and disease locked in a building called the CDC in Atlanta, and we've been able to keep it secure and in a controlled environment. Surely we can do the same for this. Surely that's possible to be able to get help to our citizens. GW Pharmaceuticals, absolutely not. Well, GW Pharmaceuticals then came to market with their own version of medical cannabis oil. And I thought, how interesting was that? They opposed it, and all the while they were doing clinical trials, and they came to market with Epidiolex, FDA approved. And I thought, this is great. I mean, I'm not against it. It's great. Let's do something. Problem was, none of the patients that we were dealing with, only a small handful, even qualified for the clinical trial here. And it was done in Augusta. And then once they started taking it, it didn't have the effect on it because it was a synthetic. It had been buried down so far in the synthesizing of that product that it wasn't having the natural effect that natural cannabis oil was having. So you did see some reduction in seizures, but you didn't see as much as you did with the natural oil. And now the reports are coming out that this is almost $32,000 a year through insurance, because this will be covered through insurance. But how are you going to afford it? So we had to do something, ladies and gentlemen. We had to do something. And that something was House Bill 324, the Georgia Hope Act. Now, I backed away from this. You know, you can take a lot of heat for something. And a lot of times it starts getting old. You know, you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. You want to re-gear. And I said earlier with Chairman Setzler, the opposition is good. Chairman Setzler, if anybody kept me in line, it was him. Because I knew I didn't want this to go down a recreational path. I knew that I wanted a true medicinal research standard bearer. We are the place for this to be done right. Colorado had come to us during the testimonies and said, please don't go down the route we did. That was their testimony. They pulled us aside, Alan Peake and I both, and they said we had something really good with the medical understanding of what we were doing. We had research analysis coming, we had medical professionals, and then we opened the door for recreational. And it has become the Wild West. Y'all, please don't do that. So I was committed to that. I gave my word to Sheriff Gullidge. I gave my word to Phil Miller. I'm going to do this, but I will not let it, I'm not going to support smoking use of it. And then I started doing an analysis of the states that had implemented some type of medical policy and within 2 to 3 years had then transitioned into full-blown recreational use of the plant. There are 10 states. 9 put it on a ballot initiative and let the people vote for it. 1 did it as a legislative measure. The overwhelming majority all started with the smoking medical use. So those societies had already been somewhat accustomed or desynthesized, or well, we've already got it medically smoking. Georgia did not. We stayed with the oil-based use. So what the HOPE Act does is this. It simply says that 8 companies will be allowed, be issued private licenses to grow cannabis in the state of Georgia. 6 will be true private companies. 2 will be allotted to the university system. The University of Georgia and Fort Valley State University are 2 land-grant universities. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to go down 85, I-16, 75, I-20 and see blowing fields of marijuana. It's just not going to happen. This is going to be in a highly controlled environment with requirements that only a few companies are ever going to be able to obtain. I want to tell you, as we started going through this, and what truly helped us was the medical community did start weighing in. And the bill was endorsed by Leading Age Georgia, which is a faith-based organization that specifically deals with elder care in the state of Georgia, the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, Dr. Larry Toon at Emory University, he's a neurologist, an Alzheimer's specialist, Dr. Ben Thrower at the Shepherd Center, neurologist, Dr. Oliver Glass, a geriatric psychiatrist at Emory University. Americans for Prosperity came out and endorsed the bill publicly. Dr. James Huffman, a pediatrician in Moultrie, Georgia. And I've got their letters. They sent letters to the legislature. They started saying, we need to study this. And I said, well, why now? We've been working on this. And all of them came to the table in their testimony and said, because we've wondered why our patients were doing better. We've wondered why cognitive ability has returned. We've wondered why some of the symptoms of dementia has almost stopped, according to some of my records. Dr. Scott Cooper with Northside Neurology came and testified. And he said, I am 100% in favor of this bill. However, I have not signed off for any of my patients at this time. And I said, well, why is that? He said, because my patients, I took an oath to do no harm. He said, and I'm treating my patients. I care deeply for my patients. He said, and I've noticed a tremendous change. And this was his testimony to the House and Senate. I've noticed a tremendous change. And the change is, I had to ask, well, what are you doing? I mean, your spasticity levels are way down. Things are going well. Your blood count's right. What are you doing? And they were hesitant at first because they were getting it illegally. And I said, you've got to tell me. I'm not going to go tell anybody. And they all said, we're using medical cannabis oil. And his next question was, where are you getting it? And he said, see, that's where my concern is, Micah, because I found out that they were ordering blindly off of the internet. Now, I'll tell you one story. A pastor called me here in Paulding County. And the pastor said, hey, Mike, I'd just like to talk to you about this. I've been diagnosed with one of the eligible diseases. I'm using the oil, but I'm not going to continue using it. I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, I fell down after I took some of it. I got a little lightheaded. I said, well, did it have a bad effect on you? This is kind of the first, and that really isn't one of the side effects that some of the medical professionals are citing. And he said, it worked, but I just felt a little woozy. And I said, Pastor, will you get the bottle for me and read it over the phone here? He said, sure. And I said, well, read the ingredients. Number one, where did you get it? And he said, he told me the place, and I thought, oh, no, it's this kind of internet company that we don't know where it is, to be quite honest with you. He said, I ordered it from there. And I said, well, what's the ingredients? He said, well, it's 50% CBD, 50% THC. And I said, Pastor, I don't want you to tell your congregation what I'm about to tell you, but you were high, Pastor. There's no bones about it. That's what happened. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Okay. And he said, oh, my Lord. And I thought, but that was the reason why we needed something in state. We needed something that these people would not have to travel out of state, that they wouldn't have to order blindly. This was something that people were putting into their children, people were putting into a loved one. We needed something that we could regulate here in the state of Georgia, that we could control. House Bill 324 will allow a commission to be created by the governor, who will have 3 appointees. The speaker will have 2, and the lieutenant governor will have 2. It will be a 7-member commission that will oversee this industry in the state of Georgia. The regulatory process will go as this. They will have to meet a 24-hour security surveillance system. They will have to be in a bricks and mortar controlled environment. There will be no advertising. There will be no vaping. There will be no food products. They will have to submit to the GBI, the state legislature, and local law enforcement for a spot inspection at any moment. They have to get the approval of the local city municipality or the county and or the sheriff's office to be able to even locate in a community. They also have to be able to provide data a year out, where their oil is going from seed to sale. All of that will happen here in the state of Georgia. And folks, let me tell you, do you know the acreage that will be grown of all licenses put together? The acreage will be 9.5 acres. The only people that will be able to obtain this oil will be card holders who are registered with the state and who meet the eligible diagnosis. The doctors who sign for these card holders have to register with the state so that we know who they are. They have to do an annual check. They have to do a review. We will have a study committee specifically tasked with finding out the results that these doctors are treating with their patients on. And ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, of all the opioids, of everything, this is what we're talking about. This is not a rollable joint. This is not a syringe that gets put into a vein. It's an oil that a child can put under a parent can put under a child's tongue, or a loved one can be put under their tongue. You will be able to do a lotion or a gelatin capsule or a transdermal patch. That's all that will be allowed in the state of Georgia. It will be highly regulated. It will cost a great deal of financial investment for these companies that want to invest, and that is to be able to cover the machinery. It is to be able to cover the cost of doing that type of business. Every bottle will be lab tested. Patients in this state will go to a facility, and they will be able to know that the bottle they are receiving and putting into their loved one, they know where it came from, it's been tested, they know the data and the background on each and every bottle they receive. And I'll end with this. Thank you so much. 2 things. The law enforcement came together. Joe Jerkins. Does anybody know Joe Jerkins, mayor of Austell? One of the most powerful letters we received was from Austell Police Chief Bob Sterrett, who said, as a law enforcement officer, I have committed my life to the use of illicit drugs. I will fight to continue getting them off the streets, and I will never support recreational use of marijuana. But my best friend was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and I have his letter right here, and he wrote a full page of how he participated in Joe's therapy with him. And he said, I saw my best friend, the mayor of this community, unable to sign his name to city checks or documents or resolutions because of how Parkinson's affected him. And I've now seen an oil change his life. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to smoke marijuana in this state, you could probably go out those doors and in less than 20 minutes find that substance to do with it what you will. It's available. Anybody in this room, and certainly the sheriff's office and police department, can tell you that. But if you wanted to get an oil that's been lab tested and that you know where it is to put in your child or your loved one, you can't do that in our state. And House Bill 324 is going to change that. These licenses, the commission is going to be named here in the next week or 2, hopefully, at least hopefully by the end of September. Once those licenses are awarded, you have 12 months to be up and running and to have oil ready for the citizens in this state. That's it. That's all. And I will commit to you that this is not recreational. These are law-abiding citizens and families who are simply wanting to help a loved one get a medicine that works. So thank you for allowing me to serve you, and thank you for allowing me to present today. I'll be after for questions, and thank you for allowing me to go over as well.